In a new age of Watchmen, a team of individuals, pooling their talents and abilities, come together to bring analysis, reaction, and comedy to the fold. This is their chronicle. This is Accounting Arc.
Right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast. And I am actually really pleased to have today Greg Kyte. And I'm not going to do justice to his introduction. So, Greg, do you mind introducing yourself and what kind of your day job is, I guess? And we'll get a little more into why you're on a non-traditional category later.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Greg Kyte. I am a licensed CPA in the beautiful state of Utah. I know you're out in the beautiful state of Hawaii. Both amazing places in completely opposite ways in terms of scenery and topography, things like that. I got my CPA license back in 2011, so it's been 13 years now since I've been doing that. My day job, I work as the in-house CPA for a group of medical office buildings. And we have such a small staff, I get to make up my title to fit whatever circumstances I'm in. So I'm if I want to flex on somebody, I'm a CFO. If I'd like to dodge responsibility, I'm an accounts payable clerk. So I can be anywhere in between. And but also I do also have a lot of responsibilities for because it's basically commercial real estate management is the industry that I'm in, and so I actually do a lot of stuff in terms of managing the actual properties, everything from managing the maintenance team to even like reviewing contracts, even doing a little bit of light lawyer. I practice law without a license, but it's okay since I represent the entity that one of the parties in the transaction. So a lot of that kind of stuff. It's fun, very engaging work that I do.
Cool. And what was it that how did you get to doing that? What's kind of the history there?
Well, I was a former life. I was a middle school math teacher, so I actually taught math for 10 years. And when the dream of home ownership started slipping through my fingers, and also when I realized that after 10 years of teaching middle school, you kind of go, I'm not a big fan of these little bastards anymore. Then you go, so between both of those, it wasn't a great fit for me with teaching. I think I was a great teacher, but all of the other stuff that's involved with teaching was not, just didn't really blow my skirt up, so to say. But when I was in college the first time, it was kind of a toss up for me between going into math education and going into accounting. So when I was like, this career path isn't really panning out the way I'd hoped to, I was like, well, there was a plan B. Let's do the plan B. So I went back to school, mostly, like night school and independent study kind of stuff, got my accounting degree. And right as soon as I finished with my accounting degree, I got hired by a mid-sized local firm. And I was there for about a year, but also wasn't a huge fan of the firm that I was working for. It's very much the story of the billable hour ruled the entire thing, and it just was not. It's not a kind boss when you're ruled by the billable hour. So after about actually it's funny. I say I worked there for 2,003 hours because I needed the 2,000 for licensure, and so about let's see, a week before I had my full year, I just approached one of my clients on an engagement I was working on if he wanted me to work in house, because I could see a way where he could save a little money. I could probably make a little bit more money, and we'd both probably be happier than where we were at the time. So he said, yeah, but then immediately like the next day he called the managing partner of the firm that I worked for, and he's like, "Hey man, let's stop screwing around. I need Kyte now, and you don't really need him because it's not busy season. So cut him loose and then let me have him." And I was like, "No, no, no, wait. I got to make sure I get my hour or my year of experience." So I went through all my time cards up to the to that time, and I was like, okay, so I can actually leave on Tuesday could be my last day, and even that day, like I said, literally 2,003 hours. So lunch came around, I was like, I got him now. Am I coming back after lunch, or am I just I am coming back after lunch? Okay, so so I started working at the company that I'm at now after 1 year in public accounting, and yeah, so I guess that's sort of the path that got me to where I'm at now, and 15 years where I'm at now. I'm super happy
Wow.
with it. So yeah.
That's awesome. That is quite the path. It reinforces a little of you got to be good in math to be an accountant because you're a math teacher.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah,
true?
kind of. Although I don't know, I got my opinion about that. I guess maybe I have a vantage point that might be a little bit unique with that, and that is that I don't. I mean, we've got spreadsheets to do all the math. I mean, I don't have to do any complex math with my job. What I've always since getting into accounting from a math background, accounting to me is more organization. It's very like if you're we I feel like I'm the Marie Kondo of numbers is what I am. So it's like I'm trying to make sure everything's very well organized and as simple as possible. And if I can do that and help make sense of it, that's what the job is. In terms of just math, I guess you got to be at least comfortable with numbers to do what we do. Um, yeah. Also, I remember my man because a lot of what I do is a management accounting for my job. I remember my undergrad management accounting class that I took, and I was like, "Oh, this is just story problem class. Like this is the same kind of stuff I teach to my eighth graders, just with business scenarios." So yeah, so I guess I'm sure math helps me quite a bit, but we all know that it's not. You don't have to do long division to do this job.
Yeah, we're not doing any kind of calculus and,
Right,
and
right,
stuff. It's
exactly.
probably more interpreting the rules around the
E-
numbers than it is actually adding the numbers together per
e-
se.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, if it's not the numbers that are exciting you, what really is do you find exciting or invigorating about the work that you do?
It's exactly what I said. I'm all about. That's the thing in my personal life. Because you remember when Marie Kondo was like a big deal? She had her
Hmm.
TV show and everything, and her book was a bestseller and all that. I got that book and I watched her show and I was like going, oh, everything she's doing, I already do that. And I'm a very organized, very structured person. I love all of that stuff. And so and even that was what was invigorating and exciting with the job I got into because they did not have an in-house accountant before me. And so, like I said, I was on the engagement from the firm, and that's the weird dynamic of the billable hour is that they were going, we don't want to. I mean, they already had a huge bill from the company because they didn't have any accountants in house, so they were basically outsourcing all of it to the company, and so to the firm. And the firm was like, we're already giving them a huge bill. We don't want to overwhelm it and drive them away from us. So they were just doing kind of the bare minimum in terms of getting the numbers where they needed to be to do, the compiled financial reports and the tax returns and things like that. And so then when I got in house, I was like going, oh, this is a mess in here. It was uh not a disaster, but it felt like it was like there was all these band-aid solutions that had been put on accounting problems in the company. And I swear it was probably the first 4 years of work in there where it was just me peeling off band-aids and going, what was underneath here? Fix it. And as soon as that's fixed, go to the next thing, peel it off, go, what was under here? Oh, this is not right. Fix it. And again, by getting rid of all these band-aid solutions, the bad part of the band-aid solutions is that over time as a whole, they ended up being more complex than if they just solved the problems
Mm.
initially. So by doing that, it was a ton of work, but it was very engaging because it's all just problem solving. Going this isn't right. How do we make it right? And then, like I said, after a bunch of years, I was like, oh, this is this is wonderful and it's simple and it's easy and it's straightforward and people can understand it. I can explain it easily rather than, having 50 different things that we did that weren't according to I don't know, the playbook, I guess the playbook of how
Mhm.
we generally treat our owners and our occupants in the building. And getting all that straightened out was, yeah, incredibly rewarding. And now the cool thing is I'm kind of in charge there. And so I'm able to keep this very simple, very well-oiled machine moving forward. And with all the work that I put in at the front end, it doesn't take a whole lot to just keep it moving now. So I'm found myself in a pretty cushy place after 15 years of working there.
Nice, nice. That's
Yeah,
that's definitely your not traditional path, because you're also not in a traditional finance role either. But
right.
there's other things that make you non-traditional. We were just
Yes.
talking about your appearances on Comedy Church. You want to tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about that side?
Yeah, so I back when I was a teacher, I started doing stand-up comedy. So it was about 2002 I started doing that. And then I made the career change and stand-up comedy came with me. And the cool thing is that accounting, I mean a lot of people are like that's weird. You do stand-up and you're an accountant. And granted that is weird. There's not like I I want to say there's 6 of us in the world who do both. I'm sure there's more, but I've only found five more of me out there. But the cool thing is that the way accounting works is you need something kind of mundane and plain, and but also something that's complex and has a lot of quirks and things that you go, this is things that's kind of like this is sort of a weird aspect. And if you've got a whole field of stuff like that, it's ready for a comedian to come in and make fun of it. So at one point I had an entire headlining set that was all just business and accounting jokes, and it was funny because like I realized sometimes that it's like, oh, drunk frat boys, they'll follow along for maybe 30 minutes of that, and then I can tell I'm starting to lose their attention. So I stopped. I didn't keep that whole set because it wasn't as universal as a lot of other comedy, but I still do. I still have a bit. It's one of my cornerstone jokes that's about how the criminal enforcement division of the IRS, that anyone who's in that the CID, that they have to take firearms training and they carry guns, and I would be the worst criminal enforcement division agent of the IRS, because I would spend all day trying to think up some badass shit I could say when I popped a cap in a tax evader's ass. Pow pow pow, itemize that bitch. Stuff like that. So just wasting all my time. Go, oh, I got a new one. Hey, partner, I got a new one. So, anyways, it's a much longer bit than that, but that's kind of how we get into it, and it's fun. I did it at a comedy festival that I went to out in New York a while ago. So it's a winner. So yes, I do stand up comedy that led, and also just with my background in education, being knowing that I'm an entertaining and engaging speaker, and I also am a competent educator. I've done a lot of presentations for continuing education. So and the two things that I found myself gravitating to with that was ethics and fraud. And then as a result of that, I now have a podcast called Oh My Fraud that I do with Caleb Newquist. And that's a twice we what bi-weekly, every other week we drop a new episode on that. Been doing that for a couple and a half years now. I started doing some cartoons for the accounting specific cartoons. It's called Exposure Drafts. If you go on Instagram and
Mhm.
look at Exposure Drafts, that's I think my entire catalog. I haven't posted anything recently because I haven't been doing cartoon. I kind of, you start doing so much and you go, what? There's all these things I love doing, but something's got to go. And the cartoons I let go of those probably a couple of years ago was the most recent one. But they're like I said, the whole collection's up, and most of them are evergreen. So if you want to look at some cartoons, it's funny too. Every now and then somebody was found me because of the podcast, and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you were the guy who did exposure drafts. And he was like, in our break room at my firm above the microwave, we had one of your cartoons that somebody just printed out on the printer and taped up in the break room. And I go, that's pretty cool. So yeah, so they're out there.
I love how you've incorporated so many of your other creative talents into this. I'll ask you about one other podcast that you shared with me that had was dealing with alcohol and ethics.
Oh yeah, yes. So that's kind of a cool story. So one of the ethics podcasts that I did a long time ago, I because one of the things I had to figure out when I first started doing webinars, I was like, this is horrible because my whole like my value add to anything educational is that is the jokes. And I realized that if I'm doing a webinar where I'm alone in a room all by myself, just with my laptop, trying to tell jokes to no one, it doesn't matter how good the joke is, everything turns into like a bad dad joke. Like this guy's trying really hard, but he's really not that funny. And what I figured out, I cracked the code on how to actually make my webinars fun and funny. And I need to have a co-host. And ideally it's someone who's physically present with me doing the webinar. So I had a couple. So I started just tapping into my local local comedian friends who, you know, who were insightful, intelligent. I didn't need them to know the content. I just needed them to like, riff off of stuff with me when needed. And so there was this one webinar. I actually had two comedian friends who joined me for an ethics webinar, and we talk about Dan Ariely a lot in my ethics webinar. He's a behavioral economist. He's done a lot of research on ethics and what nudges people towards more ethical behavior. And I mean, weird epilogue. Do you know much about Dan Ariely?
I do not.
Okay, so yeah, so he's this ethics researcher, but then he got busted for lying about his research on ethics, which is it'd be difficult to find something as ironic as an ethics researcher, making tweaking his own data to for his own benefit. But this was before that scandal, and I think a lot of his points are still valid. Anyways, I had a couple people, and we just on a whim, I was like, we need to make a drinking game out of this, where every time we mention Dan Ariely, we got to take a shot. And so we did that for that podcast. It was fun. It was a blast, and it was hilarious. And then I was like, it'd be cool if we did. Well, and did you watch any Drunk History when that
No.
was?
Oh, yeah. The series, yeah.
Yeah. So and there's like you can get podcast like video podcasts of like the drunk kitchen where somebody's getting drunk and giving you a cooking lesson on how to cook chicken marsala or something like that. So like this whole idea of do what you do but do it drunk became kind of a thing for a while. And I was like, what if we did drunk ethics for accounting CPE? So me and a comedy and really the guy that I do Comedy Church with. So I have a bi-monthly show that I do locally called Comedy Church. We put a ton of stuff online about that. My partner in that, Adam Browd, he actually has his MBA, and he also has a background in psychology. He was thinking about becoming a PhD research psychologist. So he's got lots of insight, both from a business side and from a psychology perspective on ethics. So he was my buddy. And the whole idea was we're going to do a 50-minute continuing education course on ethics where every 7 minutes we take a shot of whiskey. So by the end of the show we had 7 shots, and so it was very tame for the first half, and then it just fell off a cliff. And afterwards we were like, I have no idea if what we just did is even listenable, because we were just so shit-faced by the end of this thing. But what was awesome is that we, upon re-listening to it, it's like it was really fun, because even when we were like gonzo, we still made actually some of the most poignant points that we made in those podcasts, because they were podcasts that were eligible for CP. Some of the most poignant points were after we were already gone, which was pretty cool. Made me feel pretty proud that it's like, yeah, I really know my material when I can still deliver it, and put an exclamation point on the end of it when I'm drunk. But the funny thing about that was we did that all for the Earmark CPE network. Somebody in the accounting profession was like, this is not appropriate at all for anything that's professional. And this is we gotta, and they basically went on a mission to get us banned. And so I guess they wrote all 50 states NASBA boards or state society boards, and they also wrote NASBA complaining about it, and NASBA cracked down on Earmark and said, yeah, this is not okay. And it's like, but the content is so good, and they're like, yeah, the swears and the alcohol, it's not okay. So the guy who runs Earmark, he's which I'm very I think this was very cool. If it was me, I would have been like, the bread and butter for any CPA or CPE provider is you got to have that NASBA, that NASBA whatever decal on your website that it's all NASBA approved. And I would have folded immediately and just been like, hey, sorry, Greg, got to cut you loose because I'm getting in trouble. But he was like, no, we're not going to do it. So he had his editor go back through. We didn't re-record anything. He just went through and beeped out all the swears and any reference to alcohol in the whole thing. So at that point, it's just a lot of beeps and two guys who get progressively more weird. But yeah, so that's where it landed. So we had we broke NASBA with our drunk ethics podcast series.
And now that makes sense, because I was just reviewing the speaker contract I got from the AICPA, and there were these clauses about inebriation and swearing. And now I know why they have that in there, because I was like, this was not in this agreement I signed 3 years ago.
That's hilarious. Yeah, and you know who I've never done any speaking for ever? The AICPA. Not even once. So, but also that's one of the things, and I think that's all. I mean, if we're talking accounting, just accounting in general, I'm a huge believer, and I'm sure you're right there with me, that you have to have a niche. Like there has to be something. You can't just be like, oh, what's your industry? Cool, and then whatever anybody says, cool, I do that. What's your what kind of accounting services you need, and whatever they say, you go, cool, I do that. If you do everything for all people, you suck at all of it. You don't have deep skills for any of that stuff. And I feel like that's, I mean, just in terms of my personal journey, my personal career, and my personal brand, that's the same thing where I go, I am funny, and I'm edgy. And that's my stuff. And both of those things, there's certain groups that's not the right fit for. Like, for instance, I can't remember when you and I first met. My guess is it was probably at a ZeroCon.
I was going to say ZeroCon, yeah.
Yeah. And so I emceed 4 different ZeroCons, which is a huge badge of honor that I have, because apparently Xero, the accounting software company, for their annual conference, I'm the only guy that they've ever had MC more than once, and I did it 4 times in a row. And that was and honestly, I kind of think the reason they cut me loose is because people were starting to associate. I was never a Xero employee. I was always just a contractor. Like, people are starting to associate Greg too much with our brand and with our conference, and he's not us. So I think that's why that ended up ending. But I had a blast. But the other reason why I think that they had to let me go is Xero was growing as a company. So when I first started doing stuff with Xero, that was back in the Rod Drury days, the guy, the founder, and he was like a skateboarder. I mean, he was an older gentleman, so he was like a skateboarder dad. But he still was, he kind of had this punk rock vibe around him, but the company had gone public. It was getting bigger, and the bigger a company gets. So I was a great fit with punk rock Xero, like this underdog trying to make their way. And but then you start getting enough people in the HR and PR departments, and all of a sudden I'm scary. I'm a threat because I could say something or do something that's edgy that could come back to bite you in the butt. I totally understand that. So there's kind of a sweet spot for organizations where I fit wonderfully with them, but I also know that likely I'm going to grow out of that, because the bigger a company is, the tighter their butts end up clenching. And so, and comedy, and that's the thing, comedy is risky. It's very risky. And so you get to that point and people don't want you, which is great. And also that's true for the AICPA. AICPA, obviously, their biggest fear is any of their members being offended by anything that they do. So comedy is going to offend some people. Swearing, obviously, that offends a lot of people. So I'm just not the right fit for the AICPA, and that's awesome. There's other places where I'm a great fit, and those people seek me out.
And that's why I'm glad that you came on the podcast, because some of what we're trying to show here is that we're all of us our profession is, I'm going to say it this way, our profession is very diverse, and we're not all the blue suit wearing, red tie,
exactly,
typical kind of accountant that you hear about. I want to shift the conversation a little bit, because I think you painted a really great picture of kind of how you yourself actually are really non-traditional. You came through a non-traditional path as well, because
Yeah.
it's kind of second career for you. Um, a lot of what we say is that people in the profession are agents of transformation, and so I'm kind of curious. It's I hear a lot of comedy, right? And so is that your superpower, or what would you consider your superpower?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably the superpower. Because again, I find people regularly who, well, even with the Oh My Fraud podcast that we got going now, because it's not a comedy podcast, but Caleb Newquist, my partner, we have a good time and we're joking around and having fun doing it. And so when people are like, oh my gosh, for whatever CPE stuff that I do, when people are like, you've made ethics like enjoyable, where it's not just this horrible thing that I dread doing every 2 years to make sure that I've got the right credits to get recertified. The fact that people are like going, that was insightful, it was engaging, and it was entertaining, and I had a good time. I go, that's awesome. That's I'm making a difference. I'm helping to make people's lives better by doing that. So and even like when I do have the opportunity to MC accounting conferences, same thing where I go, I know that anybody who hires me to MC their accounting conference, their expectations will be exceeded, because I know I can go in and I can set the tone, I can keep the energy up, I can keep people having fun. Even if somebody goes up and they spend 50 minutes doing a product demonstration on how they're incorporating AI into their into their footnotes of their financial statements, and everybody's nodding off. Get me back up there. I'll get them back. I'll get them hyped back up and give them a lot of energy. So that is, I'd say that's probably this, if I did have a superpower in the accounting profession, that's where it is. And again, I mean, kind of to your point, the accounting profession is diverse. Just I think a lot of people don't know, or maybe have even been stifled on bringing the talents that they have that aren't traditional accounting talents into the accounting profession. So yeah, and like I said, I'm this very small Venn diagram of CPAs and stand-up comedians, but everybody's got a Venn diagram. You're a CPA and you're something else too. And what is that something else, and how could that help inform you? And it doesn't have to be necessarily that you like when I think about like what if your other thing is like you love bicycling. You're one of those guys with the funny suits and the helmets and the tight pants that zips up and down the bike trail. And it's like, awesome, that's cool. You know what you could do? You could start working for a company where you specialize in, if you have an accounting firm where your niche is retailers of bicycles or bicycle equipment, things like that, then all of a sudden you have some specialty. You can speak your client's language. They can talk, they can speak, they know that you understand what they're saying, and you can help interpret their specific needs like no one else could. Boom, all of a sudden you've got a superpower. So yeah, I would say that's the coolest thing about our profession. Is I don't care what my brother, he wanted to be a rock. He grew up in grunge in Seattle when grunge became a thing. He wanted so bad to be a rock star, and he is so not musical at all. And so because of that, he pivoted, and his pivot was to go to become a DJ. He was like a morning radio DJ for a bunch of years, and he was amazing at it. And he has this encyclopedic knowledge of music, and it's like I asked him once, how deep is your love? The Bee Gees song, How Deep Is Your Love? I was like, hey Bob, what album is How Deep Is Your Love by the Bee Gees? And he was like, it took him a second to go, Children of the World side B. He even knew what side
Oh my
of the
gosh.
vinyl it was on. So it was like, that's my brother. So he found another place where that stuff could be applied. But he just as easily could have become an accountant, and he could have, again, he could have been somebody who was an accountant for the rock stars, and that's a job. And there isn't, name anything, and accountants have to work there. I don't care what it is, accountants have to work there. So if you have some sort of, passion or some sort of hobby or something that just turns you on, they've got accountants there. So just be bold, go find where those firms are, or make your own firm to get in there. So I mean, it's a treasure of this profession that we get to work with everybody. So find your people and serve them with your accounting skills.
I love that statement. That's something too. Every time I talk with students, I'm kind of like, what do you love? Like, that's where you want to work. And even when we hire people for our firm, we actually use a personality assessment and we look at what do they actually like and enjoy. And we look at whether or not those industries actually align with the clients that we have. And then we try and assign them to those. Because, like you said, yeah, if you're actually interested in what they're doing, like for me, I'm a foodie and I'm not just the turn my nose up at stuff foodie. I actually understand how food is prepared. I understand how a restaurant runs. And so when I have clients that are in that industry and I talk with them, it's a lot more engaging and interesting. I think both for me and for them because they're like, oh, you actually understand some of the challenges we're having operationally, and what you're doing today is actually a good example of that too, because you're there with the maintenance and the operations, and it's way more value when we're doing beyond just the accounting.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Couldn't have said it better. Plus, I wish, yeah, that the restaurant industry is actually one that, it's not so much. Every now and then people think I'm a foodie and they're wrong. I'm actually just a glutton. And so because of that, I would, if my industry was the restaurant industry, I would be so fat and happy all the time. It'd be wonderful.
Uh, well, actually, so my next question is, what is your critical vulnerability? Mine was actually food. What is your critical
Oh, oh,
vulnerability?
well, I mean, I think I kind of laid it out. Is that my critical vulnerability? I mean, if we're talking about the superpower
Hmm.
being comedy and being able to bring laughter and humor into the profession, that's also the kryptonite. That's what tank drunk ethics is, that somebody's going to be offended, and if you offend well, I don't know, because that's the thing. It is the critical vulnerability. I mean, even before even before the mics were hot, we were talking about my comedy show, Comedy Church, which is, it's very specific. There are a lot of people who will be absolutely offended by the comedy on Comedy Church. It's a comedy show about religion. I used to be a very committed evangelical Christian. I lost my faith. That's part of my story. I make a lot of jokes about kind of where I came from and where I'm going, and there's a lot of people who understandably, and I'd even say rightly, recoil from that because of where they're at now. And I'm not trying to change anybody's mind, but I also go, there's absolutely people who shouldn't be listening to that. So like we were talking about, this is what we were talking about. Anybody at work who says, hey, TikTok decided that I needed to see your stand-up comedy, I get so nervous because I'm just like, oh no, am I getting fired today? I mean, I'm sure I wouldn't, just because again, I think that people recognize that stuff doesn't really have any bearing on the quality of work that I do at my day job. But at the same time, I guess if somebody was, if one of the owners in one of the buildings got offended enough by what I did and was like, this guy just needs to have nothing to do with me or with any of my investments, they could go on, they could kind of do to me what that one guy did with drunk ethics, and I could be out of a job for it. So it is a critical vulnerability, but at the same time, uh, I think again, that's part of the whole niche thing. There's people that I'm good for, and there's people that I'm not good for, and I and you got to just accept that, because that's what makes you valuable.
I like that. That's definitely true. Definitely, totally true. I love it. Well, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Probably the best way is through LinkedIn, because I know all the kids are on LinkedIn, right? That's so I'm Greg Kyte CPA. I don't I listen. I have backed away from social media quite a bit lately, and it has been such a breath of fresh air to do it. But I do still regularly get on LinkedIn. Regularly meaning at least once every couple of weeks, I'll get on there and I'll go through all my DMs and reply to everybody who's reached out to me. So yeah, Greg Kyte CPA on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you. And for everyone, if you're listening, it's Kite, Kyte,
That's
instead
right.
of Ki. So Kyte.
Yep.
Well, thanks so much, Greg. I am glad that you bring humor into the profession. It's definitely something we need a lot of. I've enjoyed always when you're emceeing and watching your shows. Yeah, your humor sometimes is a little raw, maybe I'll use that
Yeah,
word.
yeah, that's a
But I
good.
think, again, it's part of your personality, and I love it. You be
Exactly.
you.
Yep. Thanks, man.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode as we looked at bringing comedy into the profession. So hope to see you again on another episode. See you then.
The Center for Accounting Transformation provides business professionals with a network for utilizing innovations that are ready for adoption, the training and resources necessary to apply those innovations, and an opportunity to engage the talent and community needed to further the pursuit of innovative accounting practices that drive responsible and mindful business performance. Find out more at our website, www.improvetheworld.net. And if you're interested in sharing your own transformation stories, please contact us there.